So who's ready today for more Mary Poppins? We're reading here at the Caribou Public Library for our chapter book story time. I'm Miss Erin. So we're reading Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers, and it's illustrated by Mary Shepherd, And we're on chapter 6 today. We're going to do what we did last time, which was split the chapter in half. So today will be the first half of chapter 6, and then next time will be the second half of chapter 6 because of lengthy sections. I don't want to get too long for these videos. So, chapter 6 is called Bad Tuesday. Bad Tuesday. It was not very long afterwards that Michael woke up one morning with a curious feeling inside him. He knew the moment he opened his eyes that something was wrong, but he was not quite sure what it was. "What is today, Mary Poppins?" he inquired, pushing the bedclothes away from him. "Tuesday," said Mary Poppins. "Go and turn on your bath. Hurry," she said, and he made no effort to move. He turned over and pulled the bedclothes up over his head, with the curious feeling increased. "What did I say?" said Mary Poppins in that cold, clear voice that was always a warning. Michael knew now what was happening to him. He knew he was going to be naughty. "I won't," he said slowly, his voice muffled by the blanket. Mary Poppins twitched the clothes from his hand and looked down upon him. "I won't." He waited, wondering what she would do, and was surprised when, without a word, she went into the bathroom and turned on the tap herself. He took his towel and went slowly in as she came out. And for the first time in his life, Michael entirely bathed himself. He knew by this that he was in disgrace, and he purposefully neglected to wash behind his ears. "Shall I let out the water?" he inquired, in the rudest voice he had. "Oh, shall I let out the water?" he inquired in the rudest voice he had. There was no reply. "Pooh, I don't care," said Michael, and the hot, heavy weight that was within him swelled and grew larger. "I don't care." He dressed himself then, putting on his best clothes, that he knew were only for Sunday. And after that he went downstairs, kicking the banister with his feet, a thing he knew he should not do, as it waked up everybody else in the house. On the stairs he met Ellen, the housemaid, and as he passed her, he knocked the hot water jug out of her hand. "Well, you are clumsy," said Ellen, as she bent down to mop up the water. "That was for your father's shaving." "I meant to," said Michael calmly. Ellen's red face went quite white with surprise. "Meant to? You meant? Well, then, you're a very bad heathen boy, and I'll tell your ma, so I will." "Do," said Michael, and he went down the stairs. Well, that was the beginning of it. Throughout the rest of the day, nothing went right with him. The hot, heavy feeling inside him made him do the most awful things, and as soon as he'd done them, he felt extraordinarily pleased and glad and thought out some more at once. In the kitchen, Mrs. Brill, the cook, was making scones. "No, Master Michael," she said, "you can't scrape out the basin. It's not empty yet." And at that, he let out his foot and kicked Mrs. Brill very hard on the shin, so that she dropped the rolling pin and screamed aloud. "You kicked Mrs. Brill?" There he is. Oh, being naughty. Bad, bad. "Kind Mrs. Brill, I'm ashamed of you," said his mother a few minutes later, when Mrs. Brill had told her the whole story. "You must beg her pardon at once. Say you're sorry, Michael." "But I'm not sorry. I'm glad. Her legs are too fat," he said. And before they could catch him, he ran away up the area steps and into the garden. There he purposefully bumped into Robert's and I, who was sound asleep on top of one of the best rock plants, and Robert's and I was very angry. "I'll tell your pa," he said, threatening. "And I'll tell him you haven't cleaned the shoes this morning," said Michael, and was a little astonished at himself. It was his habit, and Jane's always, to protect Robert's and I, because they loved him and didn't want to lose him. But he was not astonished long, for he had begun to wonder what he could do next, and it was no time before he thought of something. Through the bars of the fence, he could see Miss Lark's Andrew daintily sniffing at the next door lawn and choosing for himself the best blades of grass. He called softly to Andrew and gave him a biscuit out of his own pocket, and while Andrew was munching it, he tied Andrew's tail to the fence with a piece of string. Then he ran away with Miss Lark's angry, outraged voice screaming in his ears, and his body almost bursting with the exciting weight of the heavy thing inside him. The door of his father's study stood open, for Ellen had just been dusting the books, so Michael did a forbidden thing. He went in, sat down at his father's desk, and with his father's pen began to scribble on the blotter. Suddenly, his elbow, knocking against the ink pot, upset it, and the chair and the desk and the quill pen and his own best clothes were covered with great spreading stains of blue ink. It looked dreadful, and fear of what would happen to him stirred within Michael. But in spite of that, he didn't care. He didn't feel the least bit sorry. "That child must be ill," said Mrs. Banks when she was told by Ellen, who suddenly returned and discovered him, of the latest adventure. "Michael, you shall have some syrup of figs." "I'm not ill. I'm weller than you," said Michael rudely. "Then you're simply naughty," said his mother, "and you shall be punished." And sure enough, 5 minutes later, Michael found himself standing in his stained clothes in a corner of the nursery, facing the wall. Jane tried to speak to him when Mary Poppins was not looking, but he would not answer, and put out his tongue at her. When John and Barbara crawled along the floor and each took hold of one of his shoes and gurgled, he just pushed them roughly away. And all the time, he was enjoying his badness, hugging it to him as though it were a friend and not caring a bit. "I hate being good," he said aloud to himself, as he trailed after Mary Poppins and Jane and the perambulator on the afternoon walk to the park. "Don't dawdle," said Mary Poppins, looking back at him. But he went on dawdling and dragging the sides of his shoes along the pavement in order to scratch the leather. Suddenly, Mary Poppins turned and faced him, one hand on the handle of the perambulator. "You," she began, "got out of bed the wrong side this morning." "I didn't," said Michael. "There's no wrong side to my bed." "Every bed has a right and a wrong side," said Mary Poppins primly. "Not mine. It's next to the wall." "That makes no difference. It's still a side," scoffed Mary Poppins. "Well, is the wrong side the left side, or is the wrong side the right side? Because I got out on the right side, so how can it be wrong?" "Both sides were the wrong side this morning, Mr. Smarty." "But it has only one, and if I got out the right side," he argued. "One more word from you," began Mary Poppins, and she said it in such a peculiarly threatening voice that even Michael felt a little nervous. "One more word, and I'll—" She did not say what she would do, but he quickened his pace. "Pull yourself together, Michael," said Jane in a whisper. "You shut up," he said, but so low that Mary Poppins could not hear. "Now, sir," said Mary Poppins, "off you go, in front of me, please. I am not going to have you stravaging behind any longer. You'll oblige me by going on ahead." She pushed him in front of her. "And," she continued, "there's a shiny thing sparkling on the path just along there. I'll thank you to go and pick it up and bring it to me. Somebody's dropped their tiara, perhaps." Against his will, but because he didn't dare not to, Michael looked in the direction in which she was pointing. Yes, there was something shining on the path. From that distance it looked very interesting, and its sparkling rays of light seemed to beckon him. He walked on, swaggering a little, going as slowly as he dared, and pretending that he really didn't want to see what it was. He reached the spot and, stooping, picked up the shining thing. It was a small round sort of box with a glass top, and on the glass an arrow marked. Inside, a round disc that seemed to be covered with letters swung gently as he moved the box. Jane ran up and looked at it over his shoulder. "What is it, Michael?" she asked. "I won't tell you," said Michael, though he didn't know himself. "Mary Poppins, what is it?" demanded Jane, as the perambulator drew up beside them. Mary Poppins took the little box from Michael's hand. "It's mine," he said jealously. "No, mine," said Mary Poppins. "I saw it first." "But I picked it up." He tried to snatch it from her hand, but she gave him such a look that his hand fell to his side. She tilted the round thing backwards and forwards, and in the sunlight, the disc and its letters went careening madly inside the box. "What's it for?" asked Jane. "To go round the world with," said Mary Poppins. "Pooh," said Michael. "You go round the world in a ship or an aeroplane. I know that. The box thing wouldn't take you round the world." "Oh, indeed, wouldn't it?" said Mary Poppins, with a curious I-know-better-than-you expression on her face. "You just watch." And holding the compass in her hand, she turned toward the entrance of the park and said the word north. The letters slid down the arrow, dancing giddily. Suddenly the atmosphere seemed to grow bitterly cold, and the wind became so icy that Jane and Michael shut their eyes against it. When they opened them, the park had entirely disappeared. Not a tree nor a green-painted seat or an asphalt footpath was in sight. Instead, they were surrounded by great boulders of blue ice, and beneath their feet, snow lay thickly frosted upon the ground. Wow! Sounds like a neat adventure. We'll have to finish it next time, though. That's the middle of chapter 6 for now. So, we'll see you soon. Bye for now.